Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today's webinar is titled, I want master detail, and I want it now. I'm Dan McGann, and with me today is Doug Galt. Doug's going to be helping field your questions, so if you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll answer it as soon as possible. Actually, we encourage you to ask questions because otherwise Doug will surely fall asleep on us. A little bit about myself. I'm an Oracle ace and co-author of Expert Oracle Application Express. Most recently, I co-founded a group called Oracle Apex NYC on meetup.com. We actually have our first meetup scheduled for next week, so I'm really excited about that. Most folks just know me as that guy that wrote that plugin, right? I've been working with Enkatech now for a little over a year. If you don't know anything about Enkatech, they are a global systems integrator that's really just focused on the Oracle platform. They started in 2004 and are headquartered out of Dallas, Texas. One of the things that makes Enkatech unique is that our consultants have an average of over 15 years of experience working with Oracle. Enkatech is really best known for its Exadata implementations, but I like to think that we've made quite a splash in the Apex world as well. We have a variety of Apex-related services, everything from education to consulting. So please feel free to reach out to us for any of your Oracle or Apex-related needs. Enough with the plugs. Let's take a look at the agenda. We'll kick things off by reviewing the master detail pattern in Apex, and then I'll go ahead and show you how to create some master detail pages. But of course, the reason we're here is to add that additional detail layer. One of the nice things about doing this manually is that we can customize that behavior. Of course, we need to be very careful when doing so. I'll point out some gotchas along the way. The master detail pattern in Apex is created like everything else using a wizard. The wizard will create a few pages based on a couple of tables that have a one-to-many relationship. We recommend you have a foreign key between those tables, but it's not required. Just makes it a little bit easier when doing the creation. Of course, as you come to expect with Apex, the great thing about this is that we can get all this functionality 100% declaratively, no code required. As you work your way through that wizard, you'll come to a point where you have to make a decision about your layout. The first gives you two pages. What you'll end up with on the first page is a master table report, and you can drill from that, and the next page will give you a form on that master table, as well as a tabular form on any detail records. The other option gives you a three-page layout. We get that same master report with the same master form on page 2, but instead of a tabular form on page 2 for the detail records, we get a report, which the user can then drill down to a third page and work on the detail form there. A couple limitations I want to point out. A lot of folks are going to be tempted to use that tabular form option, the two-page layout. And of course, that's attractive because our end users love tabular forms. They can see lots of rows of data and manipulate them directly. But keep in mind there are some limitations with tabular forms. First of all, they don't support all of the item types that you use in Apex. Also, they don't support plugins, and they don't support cascading LOVs, all of which you get with a standard form, no problem. Also important is that dynamic actions don't really work well with tabular forms. So for example, if you wanted to maybe disable one column based on a value in another column for a particular row, that would be very difficult with dynamic actions. But with a regular form, that's really simple. So our recommendation is that if you're building complex forms for your detail records, go ahead and use that three-page option. Also, if you're doing several detail rows, you'll want to use that three-page option as well. Another limitation when using this wizard to create your pages is that you can only have a two-level relationship. And that's, of course, the master detail. Master detail was slated for Apex 5, but it's been pushed back to 5.1. We haven't even seen 5 yet, but luckily it's actually really easy to add subsequent levels by hand, and of course that's what I'm going to show you here today. Before I dive into Apex, just want to tell you a little bit about my setup. I started by copying a few tables from the order entry schema that exists within Oracle. And what I plan to do is create a master detail starting with customers, going down to orders, and finally to order items. A few other related tables in the mix. And another important point is that I've gone ahead and created some UI defaults for these tables in Apex. So as I'm creating various pages, if you see the tables, or the pages rather, created with drop downs or pop-up LOVs, the reason is that I've done the work ahead of time. I've set up those UI defaults, and we recommend you take the time and do the same. All right, let's get started. We'll kick things off by creating a new app, and we'll use that master detail wizard to create some new pages. So I'll go to the application builder. We'll hit create, and of course we're going to choose the database option. We'll call our application master detail demo, and we'll accept all of the defaults and just create that application. We can run it, get logged in, and you see we have a nice blank slate to start with. So I'm going to go to edit the app. We'll create a new page, and to get into the master detail to start, you need to go to form and then choose the option master detail form. The table I want to start with is customers, and notice down here it says use user interface defaults. That's set to yes, and that's why some of these columns are selected and others are not. Click next, and if you remember, we said we recommend you have a foreign key between the tables. The reason that helps is because this defaults to yes, and you'll only see related tables via the foreign key relationship. So our detail is going to be orders. And we'll continue on through here. In terms of our primary key, a lot of folks are using the row ID option for obvious reasons. The fact that we can work with primary keys over 2 columns. So I'm going to leave that option, but this decision later is going to lead to a small bug that we'll need to address. Here are a couple of master options. We get this master row navigation by default. I'll leave that enabled so you can see how it works. And of course, we need that master report as we only have a blank application at this point. At this point in the wizard, you can see I'm on the layout step. So this is where we make that decision between 2 or 3 pages. And of course, I want the detail on a separate page since we're going to add additional layers. Here we can configure our page and region names.
Dan, just to let you know, we've had a couple of people say that the page refresh is a little bit slow, so just make sure that there's time for the refresh as you go through.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I've renamed my pages. I'm using a very generic naming convention here that's really easy to crank out pages with. I do want a breadcrumb, so we'll add that. And we'll link that back to home. In the next step, we need to create a tab. I will create a tab for these new pages. Just call it customers. Finally, we can review our choices. If everything looks good, we'll hit create and take a look at what we got. So I run the page and I see I have my master report here on customers. I can drill down on a customer and see my form on the master record, as well as the orders report down below. I'm going to go back to the customers report and jump down a bit here. Choose a customer that actually has some orders, Savaji. We'll drill down here. So here we see the master record form, and below that the orders. We actually have some rows. So now we can go down to the detail form. I click edit here. We get down to that second level form. And we got all of this functionality with no work, by the way. One of the nice features about the wizard is that it defaults to yes on this master navigation here. So without returning to the master report, we can actually cycle through various records, which is really convenient. A couple things we got behind the scenes. Apex created quite a few things for us. It's really not just pages, right? We have processes to handle the fetch row as well as the next and previous navigation. Got all kinds of regions and items, branches and processes. We got a lot of stuff with very little effort on our end. So we're off to a good start. Let's take a look at what we need to do to add the next level. So currently we have 3 pages. We have the master report on page 2. We have a master form as well as a detail report. And on page 3 we have our detail form. You may already spot a pattern in here. We go report to form, report to form. So to add another level in our form here, all we really need is another report to form and a 4th page. And we can add that very easily in Apex just using a standard form and report combo. So let's take a look at adding our additional level. We'll go to our detail form page. So here we're looking at our order details, and what I want to put here is the report on order items, and I want to be able to drill from there down to the order item details. So I will edit this page, give regions a right click, and we'll choose create. And again, I need to start by going to form. Even though what I really want is a report, I need to start with form. And here I'll see the option form on a table with report. So we'll choose that. In terms of the report implementation, I'm going to go with classic just to keep things consistent. And I do want my report on page 4. I'm just going to rename this to order items. For a template, it's a standard reports region. And although I'm tempted to add a breadcrumb here because I do want it on the new page that will be created, I cannot add the breadcrumb here. It would just give me an error because we're adding additional components to an existing page, and this page already has a breadcrumb, and you can only have one breadcrumb per page. So we'll continue on and address that issue later. This will be on the order items table. Again, we're using UI defaults, including all columns. This step in the wizard is the link between our report and form. We'll leave the default. And finally, we're configuring our form page. It's going to create us a new page on page 8. I'll just change the name to order item details. Very generic naming, but it works quite well. Again, I'll choose to use the row ID as the primary key. We'll include all columns in the form. and we'll allow all DML operations. Review your choices after. If everything looks good, go ahead and hit create. And let's take a look at what we got. So I can run page 4. Before we just had order details, we now see the order items, which is great. We can drill down from order items, and we can see our order item details. We can manipulate a price, for example, hit apply, and it works just fine. Excellent. So that's all there is to it. That's master detail. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Not quite, right? There's a couple of issues here. I've ordered these in order of lowest hanging fruit. You may have spotted one or two of these already. First of which is our order items report is not driven by the actual order we're viewing. That's definitely the easiest thing to fix here. Next up, if you saw the new page for our order item detail, it did not have tabs working, and I mentioned the breadcrumbs are not working either. Not terribly hard to fix, just need to know a little bit about how tabs and breadcrumbs work in Apex. I'll show you how to get those working again. Another issue we have is that when you have a master detail, you're getting kind of far down in these detail levels, and you can't really see data related to your master tables anymore. So if we get down to the order item detail, and for whatever reason, the end user needed to see some customer related information all the way back up to the first master, then we might want to give them the ability to access that data in an unobtrusive way, and I'll show you how we can tackle that. And finally, this is actually the default behavior even when we get a standard master detail pages. What I hate about it is that the end user may enter some data in the master form and then navigate using the detail report to the detail form and lose information that they had modified in the master form. I'll show you how that works and how we can address that issue. Let's kick things off by fixing that detail report. So here's our detail report, order items, and you see that we have one order here that we're working with, but the order IDs here are all different. So this is the easiest problem to address. We just go to edit the page. You can go into your order items report and view the query that Apex generated for us. What we need to do is add a predicate. We need to add a where clause so that we're filtering by order ID. The order ID that we need to filter by is actually going to be in this item right here, P4 order ID. So we can just go back into that report. Add our where clause, hit apply, run it again, and perfect. Now we're just looking at the order items related to our parent record. All right, that one wasn't tough. Next up, we need to address the tabs and breadcrumbs issues. So if I drill down to our new second level detail page, you see we don't have breadcrumbs and we don't have tabs. So I'll go to edit this page. Adding the breadcrumbs is relatively simple. I'll right click on regions, go to create, and what I want is a breadcrumb region. Most of the time you can move through this breadcrumb wizard and just accept all the defaults. Sometimes something goes wrong. So I'm going to break this on purpose and show you how to fix it. I'll leave all the rest of the defaults, except that I do want to link my new breadcrumb to its parent, and the parent in this case is order details. So we'll select that, hit finish, take another look at our page. Awesome, we have breadcrumbs, they're just in the wrong spot, right? So what went wrong there? Well, I changed the display point on purpose to show you how it sometimes gets it wrong in Apex, and of course how we can fix it. If I go into the shared components column on the right, I can drill into the page level template that we're using. And if I focus on display points, I can see that the breadcrumb display point is page template region position 1. I can use that information to go back into our region, our new breadcrumb region, focus on user interface, and then change the display point from where it is now to where it should be, apply the change, rerun the page, and now we have breadcrumbs in the right spot. So that's one of two. Tabs are up next. If I go to edit this page, something odd here is that I don't see any tabs under parent tabs, but we know that this application already has at least 2 tabs, home and customers. The reason we're not seeing them here is that this page is not set up to use tabs, so we need to fix that issue first. I'm going to drill into the page attributes. I'll scroll down just a touch, and you see this setting here for a standard tab set. I'm going to select the only tab set we have in this app, apply that change, and now we see some options under parent tabs. If I run the page as is, we see the tabs, so the only remaining problem is that I want customers to look current, as though we're under that tab right now. To fix that issue, we'll open up the tabs and this time drill into customers. And I'm going to come down here to tab also current for pages, I'll add a comma, and our new page is page 8. We'll apply that change, rerun, and now it's looking like I wanted it to. Perfect. Moving right along. So next up, we have this issue where we're down into these lower detail levels and we're unable to see data related to master tables a bit higher up. So really easy issue to address in Apex, and can actually look pretty slick too. We can do this in a rather unobtrusive way. I'll show you how to do this. So this is the page where, for whatever reason, your users may need some customer related information. So I'll edit this page, and so you don't have to watch me type, I'm going to steal a query, come back to Apex, and I'll create a new region. And it's going to be a report region. It'll be a classic report. And we'll call this customers. Now, what makes it pretty slick is this region template, a real simple choice. I'm going to choose the region template, hide and show region, hidden first. We'll paste in our SQL query, and you'll see it's a really simple query on customers. But there is one important part here. We only want to view the customer that we started with when we first drilled down, right? So I need to filter this, and I need to somehow access that customer ID. That item for us is actually on page 3. So I'll swap that in here. We'll continue in the wizard, and the next choice I'm going to change is for the report template. For this particular use, I really like, at least in this theme 26, I really like this attribute value pairs left aligned. So I'll choose that. We'll create the region and see what we get. I run the page, and you may notice something new. We have this customers region here. We can open that up and then view related customer information. And you can see it's unobtrusive. If you found that your end users were opening this all the time, you might want to save them a click and open it by default. But if they just need that information some of the time, this is a nice way to hide that information unless they need it so that they can focus at on the task at hand. All right, so that was easy enough. Or was it? I've just introduced a bug, and the bug has to do with session state. You remember before when I was creating our initial master detail pages, I chose to use row ID. Row ID is the reason that what I just did is not really working as we might expect. Actually, let me just sort of demo that. It might work off the bat, so we'll choose, we'll open up customers. We're looking at this customer. But if I go back to our customer details page, it's a completely different customer. So what exactly went wrong here? It really comes down to session state and really understanding how session state works in Apex. There's three types of state, and this is really in just about any application development platform you could possibly use, from Java to some of the newer MVC frameworks and JavaScript like Angular. They all have three different types of state. You have your record or persisted state, which is the actual value in the database, and definitely that's the most important state. Then no matter what platform you have, there's a concept of session state, and this is the application's working state. And in Apex, this could be persisted or in memory. I'll show you how that works here in just a bit. And finally, we have a page state, and the page state is what the user actually sees and manipulates. And one of the most important things you need to learn is how all these states work together, and how you can get them to work as you need. So let's see what went wrong here. When I started back here at customers, if I drill down on Maximilian, just hovering over this link, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of my browser, you'll see a URL. And in positions 7 and 8 in the URL, you'll see p3 underscore row ID, that's position 7. Position 8 is a row ID value. And when I click this, we view Maximilian, and we can see these values up here. So what happened when I navigated to this page, URL syntax set p3 row ID equal to this value in persisted session state. I can click this session link here in the developer toolbar, and you can see that the row ID, in fact, matches what we see in the URL. However, the rest of the data still matches somebody completely different, and that includes our customer ID, which I'm trying to refer to in a lower level detail page. So that's definitely a problem, and so we have really three different states going on here: what's in the table, what's in the page, and what's in session state. And the issue, of course, in session state is persisted versus in memory. When this page was rendered, Apex related processes on the rendering side can actually render the page. They can take the values from the record state from your table, move them through session state in what's called in-memory session state, and then render the page so that we're viewing the page state. And what's great about that, being that they're internal processes, they have a more granular control over how Apex works. They can skip that persisted state. The advantage there is they can skip a lot of inserts or updates, right? You can see there's various DML operations that need to happen for a persisted state to work, and if you can skip that, well, it can render the page that much faster. So that's why they've done that. But it leads to other issues like the one we have now. So what I really need, when this page is rendering, I need the value from customer ID to get into persisted state. There's different ways to do this in Apex. We'll focus on a really easy one right here. So here's my customer ID. I'm going to right-click this and create a computation. The computation type I'm going to use is static assignment. I'm sorry, not static assignment. I'm going to use item value. And all I'm going to do is take the name of our item and paste it down here. So I'm setting P3 customer ID equal to the value in P3 customer ID. Simple enough. I'll create that. I'll run it. We must have fixed the problem, right? So I can drill down to orders. We're looking at Maximilian. I can go down to the next level detail and curses. Didn't quite fix it, did we? So the next issue, and something that's very fundamental in Apex, is the concept of timing. And that's really one of the great features of the tree view that we're using here as opposed to the older component view. We see things in order of operations. And so you can see that my computation for customer ID actually ran before we pulled out the record from the table and put that into in-memory session state. So I just went a little too soon. I'm going to pluck this guy out of here, and we'll move down to the bottom. This is one of the few times you might consider using an after regions timing point. So I'll drop this computation a little later. Now we can run this page. We're looking at Maximilian. We'll try drilling again, all the way down to our second level detail. Ah, now we're seeing the data we expected to see. So session state and timing. Okay, not bad. We've addressed 3 out of 4 issues. The next one, this is maybe me just being a little nitpicky. Again, it's the default behavior. It's just one that I don't really like. Let me show you a demo of what's going on here. So imagine your user is back on order details. And let's say they change the order mode from online to direct. And they forget to save their change, and they go directly then to edit a detail record for the order items. So remember, I changed it to direct. I drill down, and then I cancel the drill down. We come back to our previous page and note that my change was not saved. So this is something that I think is not really great for the end user experience, and fortunately it's not terribly hard to address, but I just want to show you exactly what's going on. When I hover over Apply Changes, again, if you direct your attention to the bottom left-hand corner of my browser, you'll see the URL. This is a JavaScript, and the JavaScript that it's executing is Apex submit, and it's passing the value of save. On the other hand, if I hover over one of these, you'll see that we actually have a regular URL. It's not JavaScript. It's not submitting the page. This is a redirect. So we're going to skip any page processing and go render whatever page we're linking to. It just so happens I need page processing for this DML operation to fire. So that's something that we need. We got to submit this page, and this is page 4. And after the DML operation runs, we then need to go to page 8. We want to improve the end user experience. So in order to do this, unfortunately, it does take a little bit of code, a whole one-liner, and this is what it looks like. We're going to call Apex submit, but Apex submit can actually take more than just a simple string. In this case, we're passing it an object, and the first property in our object is request, and I'm setting request equal to a value apply changes view order item details. Now, I did choose this particular request value for a reason, and I want to show you why. I know that I want to get this DML process to run. And if I look inside of the DML process and scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have valid update request values, valid insert request values, valid delete. request values. And what I want is an update. So you have these various options here, and I'm using one based off of this pattern. So when we submit the page, this will match, the process will run the DML operation, and then we can go to the next page. Next part in here is, next property rather, is set. And this allows me to set various item values to a value. In this case, I'm setting an item equal to the row ID that we actually want to view, the one that we're drilling down to in the order item table. So I'll copy that. And I'm going to go into my order items report. We'll open up the columns, and we see this row ID here. So we'll drill into that. This is the link column that we're using. So I'll scroll down a touch till we get to the column link, and I'm going to change the target property from page in this application to a URL. And then we'll just paste in on top our one line of code. And I'm currently on page 4. So I'm going to set an item on page 4 equal to the row ID value. So I will copy this item name because it doesn't currently exist. We'll apply the change here, and I can show you already when we hover now over this link, it looks a bit different. We now see the Apex submit, and we can see the values that are being passed to it, and we see that row ID on the far right-hand side. So that's working as we'd expect. But we need to create that item. So I'll do that in the order items region. We'll create a new page item. And this will be a hidden item. I've copied that name so I can just paste it in here. And this part's pretty important. The default, and Apex has been moving in this direction, is secure by default. So the value is protected. What that means is from the time that the page is rendered, from the time that the page is submitted, the value of the hidden item cannot be changed. That's usually good, but actually it's not what I want in this case because I plan to manipulate the value of that item using JavaScript. So I'm going to set this to unprotected, and we'll go ahead and create that item. So the last thing that I need now is a branch. We can create a branch here. And the defaults on the first part are fine. The branch needs to take me to page 8. And we need to set some items with some values as we go to page 8. When I go to page 8, I want to set the row ID item equal to the value from page 4's new order item row ID. This is the item we just created and that we're setting via JavaScript. So we'll apply that. Everything looks good here. We'll continue on. This part is important. We actually we need to set a condition type. There's a nice one here for request equals. We only want this branch to work when the request is the correct request value. So we'll paste that in there and create this branch. And I think I missed something in the branch. I'm going to go into it. I'm going to check a box. That's fairly important. This is include process success message. This ensures that if the DML process runs, it will let the end user know when they land on the next page. So we'll apply that change. We'll give it a shot.
Dan, we have a question as to how you
Sure.
got to the request name. How did you come up with that request name?
It could really be anything as long as it matches the accepted. I'm sorry, let me go a bit slower here. So if I go to edit page 4 and I look under page processing, we have a process here, process row of orders. And this is what I want to fire before we branch to page 8. And I wanted to do an update. So this process actually gives us a list of acceptable request values. And some of them are static, but some allow for a little bit of flexibility. So I chose this one here, apply percent changes percent. And so I can just replace the percent values with whatever I want, and this process will still execute and update for that request value. So that's how I ended up with the request value I chose. Let's see if it's working. Okay, so I'm going to take online and change it to direct. And I'll drill down without saving our changes. And I don't see a success message. If I go back, it's still online. It didn't save direct. Anybody spot the problem? It's something we've already talked about. It's that issue of timing. I created this branch before the DML operation had a chance to run. Where I need this branch is after, and there's only one spot for that, after processing. But also important is that conditional branches run prior to unconditional branches. So now the ordering is correct here. We can try this again. It's currently online. We change it to direct. When I drill down, now we have our action processed message. And if I go back, we see the correct value.
There's a question, wouldn't it be nice to have a confirmation message prior to the master, or when the master is being changed, but prior to going to the next page? And that's slightly different topic. That's kind of warning the user before they navigate away from a page if something has changed.
Yeah, so I actually wrote a plugin for that. You can still find it on the global plugins website. Let me explain a slight maybe usability issue with that. So imagine we installed this plugin. What the plugin does, it's called Save Before Exit. If I change a value here, and I click a link like this, that's going to take us away from the page without saving the changes, it does exactly that. It highlights the items that were changed, and it alerts the user and says, hey, are you sure you want to navigate away before you save your changes? Now the problem is the user, let's say they did want to save the changes, they'd have to dismiss the message, hit OK, and then what option do they have? Where they want to go, they want to drill down to the order items, but that won't work. In order to save the changes, they have to hit Apply Changes, and then come back into the order and drill down into the order items from there. So from a usability perspective, that would work, but it's just not as smooth or intuitive as navigating straight on through. And this is actually a technique that the Apex team uses within Apex, and I think it works really well. But of course, every application is different, and you just need to build it right for your users' needs. Thanks, that was a good question. All right, so we've addressed all of our issues. You can see how easy it is to add various additional detail levels. You can go as far as you like. Just I wouldn't go too far. May not be very usable.
Dan, before you
In summary,
move
the
on,
master detail, sure.
There's a question. What would happen if there's a validation error on the order details page when you drill down to the order items?
Good question. It would simply keep us on that page, show any validation error messages, and they would need to be fixed before the end user could then drill down successfully. All right, summary. So in summary, the master detail pattern is great for certain types of data. I think the example we have here with customers to orders to order items is a perfect example. Unfortunately, Apex only supports 2 levels natively, but as you've seen, adding additional levels is not very difficult. It just requires a basic understanding of some core concepts in Apex, such as session state and timing. If these concepts are still confusing to you, I know a class you might like. And one of the nice things about doing this manually is that we get the opportunity to enhance the functionality a little bit, customize it to our needs. All right, do we have any other questions in the queue?
Nothing at the moment.
Excellent. In that case, I think we'll call it a day. I just want to say thanks to everybody for joining us, and keep an eye out for some future webinars, which we'll have shortly. Thanks again.